March 1972. Frida is suffering from severe depression. ABBA is only months away, but at this moment, her solo career has reached a dead end. She barely gets out of bed. She spends entire days lying there doing nothing and wanting to see no one. Her faith in herself is fading. Benny is frustrated, understandably so, but despite that, he stays by her side and tries to support Frida as best he can.
The crisis was made even worse by another problem, one familiar to many people, and one that can destroy even the strongest relationships. Almost from the moment they met in March 1969, Frida had been unable to find any peace of mind. "I was tormented by completely irrational bouts of jealousy," she later recalled. "It was caused by my low self-esteem. I simply couldn't believe that a wonderful man like Benny could actually love me."
Frida needed Benny to tell her several times a day how he felt about her. But even that wasn't enough. She would ask him to explain exactly what it was he loved about her. It isn't hard to imagine how Benny must have felt. A man used to a carefree, independent life. And yet it was with Frida that he first felt a real sense of responsibility.
They became engaged just 6 months after they met. Benny had already been in another relationship before that. He had become engaged and a father at just 16. But because of his age and the life he was leading, he had never been able to take that relationship seriously.
By the spring of 1972, the future members of ABBA were already friends, but they had not yet performed together. Agneta was successfully playing Mary Magdalene in a production of Jesus Christ Superstar, while Bjorn and Benny were writing hit after hit. Frida, meanwhile, enrolled in a dressmaking school.
Frida's career on stage was not going well. Her major successes were behind her, and her later performances could hardly be called successful. "Sometimes I felt that everything I was doing was meaningless," she said. "I was trying to find some meaning in my life. Sometimes I succeeded, but not always. It was during one of those moments, when everything seemed pointless, that I decided to train as a dressmaker. It filled the emptiness I felt in my life."
At that point, she was trying to look at her future as realistically as she could. She wasn't sure she would ever become a truly successful singer, and had already begun considering a career as a fashion designer.
"I'm not much of a dreamer," Frida said. "I'm not the kind of person who will fight at any cost to carve out a place for herself. Only the strongest survive on stage, and I wasn't sure I had what it took." Frida would later say that at one point, she began to doubt everything, even whether Benny could truly love her. She felt that all she brought into his life were problems, and that he had no reason to stay. But he stayed.
Again and again, Benny reminded her that leaving the stage was not the only way out, that she could keep trying again and again, and that her recent failures were simply a reason to change something, not a reason to give up.
"Despite everything, he loved me and did everything in his power to help me, as no one else could," Frida recalled. "He urged me to take action, appealed to my reason, comforted me, and gave me his warmth." Years later, Frida would say that without Benny, she would have left the music business before ABBA ever existed. And whatever faith she still had in herself at the time rested not on success or hope, but on the man who refused to let her fall silent for good.
At the beginning of March, Frida was barely getting out of bed. She was seriously considering leaving music for good. But on March 29th, the future members of ABBA recorded "People Need Love," a song that would gradually begin climbing the charts during the spring and summer. Frida also changed record companies and joined Polar Music. There, she recorded a single with the long title, "Every Now and Then I'd Like to Live a Little," which would become her second #1 hit on the Swedish charts that autumn, the first sign that the public wanted to hear her voice again.
It is important to understand that none of this happened by itself. Nor was it the result of a sudden surge of confidence in Frida. At that time, she had someone beside her who did not try to convince her that success was waiting ahead, or promise that everything would work out. Instead, he encouraged her not to focus on the result, but simply to try, to make one simple decision, not to close the door on music for good.
After People Need Love, it became clear that this was no one-off attempt. The work continued, without grand declarations and without any sense that a new chapter in pop music history was beginning. Within this still unnamed group, the most important element gradually began to take shape: its sound. And the voices of Frida and Agneta were becoming central to it.
Frida's voice, which had only recently all but disappeared from public life, proved to be far more than just one voice among others. It became the emotional heart of the music Bjorn and Benny were creating as songwriters.
For them, this was a special moment. They were not only writing the music, they could also hear exactly how it should be sung. And that was when the perfect formula emerged. Agneta brought light and clarity to the sound, while Frida brought shadow and depth.
The recordings followed one after another. There was no rush, but there was a growing sense that they had found something important. Frida was no longer singing just to see what would happen. She was singing again with an inner confidence she had only recently believed was lost. The first reactions confirmed that feeling. The songs began to receive radio play and appear on the charts, and gradually it became clear that the success could no longer be explained by chance or a lucky coincidence. The group was finding its own sound, and with it, its future.
Then everything began to happen at a frightening pace. What had only recently been an unnamed working arrangement suddenly acquired a name: ABBA, and moved beyond Sweden. Songs that had been created with no thought of the global market began to resonate far beyond their home country. Eurovision, the first international hits, radio, television, touring, a machine that had not even existed a short time before, was now running at full speed.
For Frida, the rise was especially dramatic. Just a year earlier, she had wondered whether she had any future in music at all. Now her voice was being heard across Europe, distinctive, powerful, and carrying the very depth that pop music of the time had so often lacked. That made the contrast with the beginning even more striking. The doubts, the crisis, and the feeling that the story was about to end before it had even truly begun.
For Benny, this was also a turning point. He was no longer simply writing songs. He now found himself at the heart of a group that had unexpectedly become a phenomenon. The music he composed was no longer something private. It had become a language understood by millions. ABBA very quickly became more than just a successful group. It became part of global culture. Amid all that speed, success, and worldwide fame, it is easy to lose sight of something important: the origins of ABBA's melodies and sound, in whose creation Benny Andersson played a central role. From childhood, music was not a career or a strategy for him, but a way of living and thinking.
Benny was born in Stockholm, into a family where music was part of everyday life. He began playing the accordion at an early age, and later the piano. Not because he dreamed of becoming a professional musician one day, but simply because he enjoyed playing. As a child, his creative nature revealed itself not only through music. He might replace the boiled eggs with raw ones while our father was having breakfast, or put salt in the sugar bowl while our mother was baking, recalled his sister Eva Lise.
Once little Benny was caught stealing apples from a cellar. He tried to talk his way out of it by inventing such a fantastic story that the owner of the house, who happened to be a theater director, burst out laughing instead of punishing him and invited him to take part in a children's play.
In 1964, Benny joined a band with the deliberately strange name Elverkets Spelmanslag. It was a loud, rebellious rock band, complete with invented stage names and a love of American rock and roll.
But his first truly major success came later, with the Hep Stars. When he auditioned for them, the decision was made almost instantly. The musicians later recalled how, after the second song, Benny locked the organ's volume control at maximum, tore off his tie, leapt around the stage, and practically radiated energy. They hired him on the spot.
The Hep Stars quickly became a national phenomenon. Their spectacular cover versions, wild stage presence, sheer volume and energy drew the public's attention. Although the musicians themselves admitted that they were often valued less for their musical skill than for the effect they created.
The records sold in large numbers. The tours were accompanied by the screams of fans, and Benny himself, still very young, was living the life of a pop star without thinking too much about the future. But in time, he began to feel confined by the limits of a cover band. Benny wanted more. Not simply to play other people's songs, but to create songs of his own. And it was then that Bjorn entered his life, an equally successful musician performing with the folk group Hootenanny Singers.
Benny and Bjorn's meeting was the beginning of a rare creative partnership. Although they are quite different as people, when it comes to music, they have always understood each other without needing explanation.
ABBA is not the story of one person. It is the story of 4 strong and remarkable individuals, each with a distinct role, and each irreplaceable. Benny was responsible for the melodies, but he was never confined to that alone. Bjorn wrote the lyrics, but he was equally involved in everything else. Agnetha and Frida were the voices of the group, but their contribution was never limited to singing. That is how ABBA became what it is. Each member worked within their own area of responsibility, while all 4 took part in shaping and refining every song.
Decades have passed. ABBA has become a legend, and it will never disappear, just as great stories never do. In 2021, the group released the album Voyage, calm, mature, and remarkably true in tone. Then came the concerts featuring digital versions of the band members, an example of how a legend can continue to live in a new dimension and create new worlds of magic. Subscribe for more stories about ABBA.